Hey everyone, thanks for joining our webinar today, Strategic Plays to Make Your 3PL Stand Out. Before we begin our webinar, I'm going to move into some housekeeping and let you guys know how you can participate in this webinar. Down at the bottom of the Zoom, there's a button that you can select as Q&A. You can say hello if if you wanted to just, say hey to everyone, or maybe you know someone that's presenting today, or perhaps you wanted to ask a question around the topics that we're doing today. We're not planning on answering questions live, but we will be sending out a fact to everyone that joins with all the questions and answers from our standpoint. We hope to have some engagement here. We'll have some polls that you can vote and give your opinion, make your opinion known, as well as we'll respond to any questions directly to the individual as well as to the entire group. You guys, hope you have an enjoyable and useful day today as we cover our plays to make 3PL stand out. Now let's move on to introductions. I'm Jason Franklin from Product Marketing, and I'm joined today by two subject matter experts in the 3PL space. They're here to provide a real world examples around what we're talking about, the strategies and what they're seeing out in the field. I've got two people, Isaac and Matt, and I'd like to start with Isaac. Isaac, can you introduce yourself?
Great, thanks, Jason. My name is Isaac Scheffner, and I'm a senior team lead within our professional services department here at DePosco. I've been with the company for about 5 or so years at this point, with 3 of those years being focused primarily on the both implementation as well as execution of our WMS and OMS products, primarily within our 3PL customer base. My team and I serve as not only supply chain software implementation experts, but also true partners to our 3PLs, understanding their growth aspirations and working with them to identify and meet their success criteria. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Thanks, Isaac. And he brought up a great point. That partnership is very important as we see 3PLs succeeding and separating themselves from the competition. Matt is also joining. Matt Solani, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Hey, everyone. My name is Matt Shalani. Yeah, my role is very similar to Isaac's in that I'm also a senior team lead here at DePosco within the professional services department. I've been with DePosco for almost 6 years now. My team is also primarily focused on serving our 3PL customer base, which includes companies from a wide range of sizes, right? You have some greenfield startup 3PLs as well as middle market 3PLs, and fair share of enterprise 3PLs as well across different industries, CPG, a lot of fashion and apparel, as well as some cold storage and multiple channels, right? You see D2C, you see a lot of retail these days, as well as wholesale fulfillment services. And in terms of my customers, I manage the relationship with my customers' leadership team, acting as an advisor to our customers, which really entails understanding their desired business outcomes and translating that information into technical requirements for my team to execute on. And I also assist our sales team in some pre-sales activities, such as technical discovery, as well as scope approvals, for new prospective 3PL customers.
You guys are bringing great experience. I really appreciate you taking out the time to join. So before we get into it, we're going to talk about what's going right in the 3PLs. If you look at it, 3PLs have evolved. We'll talk about that evolution from being, let's say, a service provider of transportation logistics to more of a strategic partner, and we'll talk about that evolution a little bit more. But what's going on is this: the omni-channel and some of the other trends we're seeing has driven a huge rise in 3PL business through the need for logistics. And what that's done is it's made the area very enticing for entrepreneurs as well as business owners in order to expand and grow. So we're seeing a lot of activity in 3PLs, as well as we'll talk about the growth in a little bit. But if we want to step back and talk about what's going right, I mentioned that omni-channel and DTC. Everyone knows the impact of COVID. We've got a graph that we'll show in just a second to really show how impactful COVID actually was on the market itself and 3PL revenues. Another one is there's smaller macro trends, if you look at a global scale, that are impacting the 3PL growth. things like buy now, pay later are allowing people to maybe expand into expand into purchasing things that they couldn't before. This is especially true for smaller and growing markets like Asia and some in Europe, as well as the growth of social e-commerce. You think about a TikTok shop, no matter what's going to happen with them in the legislature, they are driving smaller businesses to grow, have assortments that they need fulfillment for, is driving them to those 3PL services. There's also a trend of larger companies. There's this intersection of labor scarcity and customer expectations that are driving some larger businesses to outsource to 3PL. So we're seeing a big trend in the different studies of people outsourcing more to 3PL providers, as well as consolidating who they use. So now instead of having two or three for different business types or business channels, they're consolidating to one that they trust, growing that individual business. And finally, a lot of the technological advancements that we've seen are allowing them to drive better margins, pushing supply chain, we'll just call it supply chain, from being potentially a cost center to more of a value driver. So now you can capture more of those value-added services that you give your company. You could drive more efficiencies. You can do things like rate shopping and adding a little bit back onto rate shopping. There's a lot of ways that now you can grow your revenue around these different businesses. Isaac, I know you've done some research and had a lot of interaction with this. You had some interesting information about the growth of the overall market. Maybe you could help us understand what you found.
Yeah, no doubt. So as it stands today, there are over actually 21,000 3PL providers in the US alone, which is a pretty staggering number. This extreme growth in the industry really highlights the growing recognition of the essential nature of these 3PL partnerships in today's supply chain landscape.
That's great. And this is that chart that I was talking about, that we were sort of, once we charted out, we were kind of amazed at this incredible growth. Isaac, maybe you can continue on and talk about what you found about this market.
Yeah, so as you can see with the graph here, the revenue generated by 3PL providers has been kind of steadily increasing over the years. But you can see the 2020, 2021, and on to 2022 graphs there. That trajectory really experienced a significant acceleration due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic really acted as a catalyst, really driving the need for these efficient and flexible logistics solutions. As everyone knows, consumers quickly shifted from purchasing their necessities in stores to online shopping. And as these e-commerce businesses boomed, more and more brands were expanding their direct-to-consumer offerings, and brands were ultimately scrambling to fulfill orders as quickly as possible with the goal of just creating a positive consumer experience. As these brands, as these customers face these disruptions and changing consumer behaviors, they turn to the experts, so these 3PL providers, to really navigate the challenges and ensure the smooth flow of goods.
I think that's huge. We also saw a lot of different brands once that foot traffic died down, really moving to pushing some, maybe brands that they had in-house and only went to retail. They started pushing them through 3PLs, also driving this growth to try to get direct connections to the customers. The other thing that we think about here is the growth drives competition. So there's huge competition. You mentioned 21,000. That is a staggering number, as you called out. And I think that drives a whole lot of competition and underscores the need for you to differentiate. We're seeing numbers from studies of churn of up to 40-50% in customers, in 3PL customers. So you've got providers that need your services, but now you've got a lot of different options on that services. So what we'd like to talk about today is how you can differentiate in this market to make sure that your company stays successful. Matt, I think you had some ideas around that.
Yeah, definitely, Jason. So yeah, first, just to touch on the revenue growth too, like Isaac mentioned, I mean, we've seen tremendous growth over the past couple of years. Just really shows how much opportunity there is in the 3PL industry. And looking beyond 2024, we're expecting a compound annual growth rate of 8 to 10% over the next 5 years, just within the domestic U.S. Within the 3PL industry. So it's clear that brands are recognizing the tremendous amount of value that 3PLs can provide to really help them scale their businesses. And then moving on to the churn topic, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? There's good churn, there's bad churn. The good churn, those are brands or customers that might not align with your ideal customer profile. Maybe you're an e-commerce focused 3PL. Maybe you have one legacy customer that's doing mostly pallet in, pallet out, B2B type fulfillment. Depending on the technology and systems that you have in place, that customer could be indirectly affecting, impacting, the throughput capacity of your e-commerce brands that you're fulfilling for and creating other inefficiencies within the warehouse. And then the bad churn, right? You can have brands that maybe fit your ideal customer profile, but they don't see value in the services you're providing as a 3PL. These are the customers that really present a good opportunity for you as a 3PL to do some introspection, right? Reevaluate how you approach the market, asking questions like, what are our core competencies? What are our value propositions? Are we using the right technology to align with these core competencies? Are we deploying our labor efficiently? Are we communicating effectively with the customer? Are we giving them a sufficient amount of visibility into their orders, shipments, inventory, right? Oftentimes, there's just a mismatch with the customer's expectations and the service level that 3PL is providing. So leveraging better technology is usually the answer to these problems, but not just any technology, right? It's really key that you use the right technology for your business, that will satisfy the needs of your customers that you're serving.
Excellent, excellent. I think you called out a number of really interesting things that I think I want to underscore. One is what you were saying kind of made me think of a term that I heard, a phrase I heard. We were working our sales kickoff, and a colleague said, "How much time are you spending working in the business versus on the business?" And I think you calling out that idea of stepping back and saying, hey, what are we really good at? What is the market saying that people need? And what is the sort of Venn diagram of where we fit, of what we're good at or what we want to be good at? And how does that match the market to make sure that we're focused on that and driving that? And all the efforts that we make go towards efficiencies of making that what we do better. I think that's a huge point that you marked out. And I think the other point is value perception to the customer, right? Having that, understanding of what you're providing to the customer, making sure that you're saying, hey, listen, we're the best in e-commerce, and that's why we're going to have expertise, processes that are going to help you excel in that, is also a valued message that 3PL should be driving. Okay. Now we wanted to take a break and actually allow you, the audience, the chance to add some input as to what our discussion is going on today. So we're going to pop up a question. Which of the following challenges do you believe is the most significant for 3PL providers in today's market? So are we talking, business costs? Is it challenging for you to capture and acquire new customers and drive revenue? Maybe there's revenue leaks where you're not capturing all the value-added services you want. There's some labor constraints. We've been hearing about that the last 5-10 years of, difficulty in finding labor as we've changed from more of a B2B type warehouse to more fulfillment centers, and we're seeing more activity, sometimes challenging of keeping people. Customers, everyone expects everyone in 2 days because of now Amazon and things that they've defined. So are you guys having trouble keeping up with that? Or are you having challenges where your customers are asking more from you, from more than that traditional logistics standpoint, and asking you to do more analytics, more sort of predictive things, things like that? Or is it just your market saturated and you've got 20,000 of those 21,000 competing against you, and maybe it's challenging to get your message and get that message that resonates with the right individuals to bring them in. So we're going to give a little bit more of time. It looks like everyone's voting in. I know it's a lot to kind of take in, but very interesting coming in. We're seeing competition, rising business costs also driving that, and some labor constraints. So we're seeing across the board lots of different issues that we're addressing here, and we'll talk about those today. Okay. So it looks like the rising business costs and tighter competition are really what's happening. So how do you manage those different business costs, and how do you, again, make that transition from a cost center into a value generator? And part of that is making sure that, hey, you're efficient in your execution, as well as you're making sure you're capturing all those value-added services that you do with individuals. I think that's also cute. And we'll talk about both of those in just a bit. All right, we got about 60% participated in the polls, and it looks like those rising business costs are what we're going to drive. So we'll talk about in a little bit how technology can help you address those rising business costs by driving efficiencies, as well as making sure that you get sort of advantages of scale in some cases. We'll talk about that too. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results with everyone. And you guys can see how many individuals are dividing what it, again, most people are looking at those rising business costs being a challenge to their business. Thanks for participating, everyone. So now I'd like to move on and talk about the evolution of 3PLs as they've moved from what I would call a sort of straightforward service provider, where you're looking at transportation services, storage services, and simple things like that, to more of a strategic partner. Isaac, maybe you can talk about this timeline and how you guys on the floor, on the field and the floor of these operations have seen this change come across in recent years.
Yeah, definitely. So, to your point, Jason, really in the early years, 3PLs focused on, we'll call it more basic services like storage and transportation. The 3PL to customer relationship was a little bit transactional, really. Customers were looking to, ship pallets and pallets of products to 3PLs that had that space available in their warehouse. But ultimately, for those pallets of product to kind of sit a while until demand started to actually ramp up. But with that said, over time, the industry really started to expand into value-added services and really adapted to the rise of e-commerce. 3PL providers were really starting to be kind of expected to offer more specialized workflows to really meet those customer needs. An example of 3PL specialization that I've seen is, kitting or bundling inventory workflows to support, sample product sales their customers' brands were promoting. Another, example of specialization or really even kind of compliance is special packaging workflows for, fragile products or even cold storage items, to Matt's earlier point. So, the ever-changing e-commerce environment really meant that 3PLs had to be dynamic. They had to be willing to offer value in different ways to really abide by their customers' requirements. If we fast forward here to the mid-2000s or so, technology adoption became crucial for inventory management and advanced tracking. Customers had to provide consumers with real-time order tracking once their orders had been shipped. And this really required these 3PL providers to be fully integrated with a system that could track the entire order lifecycle. Customers were asking for real-time inventory visibility and wanted the ability to report on helpful insights to really help drive and make strategic business decisions. Insights in the form of data points such as highest moving products or even sales volume by state or by country, fulfillment timing, et cetera. So leveraging an advanced WMS along with an advanced OMS system put 3PLs in advantageous positions, making them more appealing to prospective brands. Today 3PLs really are strategic partners offering customized solutions and ultimately playing a vital role in their supply chain strategies.
I think you called out a couple different things that stood out to me. One, that transparency. We saw some different studies where it's interesting. There's that 2-day sort of perception that everyone wants everything in 2 days. But what we're actually finding more recently, studies have found that people don't necessarily need it in those 2 days. They just want to have transparency of where it's coming and when it's coming. So that tracking is much more important than actually getting it there. So they don't mind if it's going to be there in 3 days. If you have the right technology stack that allows you to push out notifications to that individual. So you can potentially not hit that 2-day time frame, but still have high customer satisfaction because the individual that's receiving it knows exactly when it's going to get there. The other thing that I think has been, that you mentioned that was really important is that data sharing. Again, it sort of goes under that same transparency message. In our recent customer advisory board, we had some different 3PLs having open discussion. And one of the things that came up that we had sort of the longer discussion around was how business owners that are moving to 3PLs, maybe they're growing a new brand, they have this tremendous vested interest in it. And they really want to have that control, but the control is different. You're having it now, you're passing it over to a 3PL. And the way to manage that is providing them with the visibility, being able to have some sort of portal where they can look in on their own, and it doesn't necessarily take a lot of cycles from your team is also very important and part of this technology expansion. And I think, Matt, what do you think about when you're seeing all these different things?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Jason. So to echo Isaac a little bit there, specialization, that's been a really common theme that I've seen in our 3PL customer base here at DePosco. We're seeing more and more 3PLs leverage technology to bring certain more complex workflows in-house, right? And depending on the market that 3PL is serving, right, those offerings may differ a little bit. So, for example, more of an e-commerce focused 3PL might be advertising services like Isaac mentioned, kitting, personalization, product image processing, right? For like a Shopify listing as an example, returns processing, direct marketplace integrations, rate shopping across different parcel carriers, right? So this whole vertical integration strategy is becoming much more prevalent. And it's very appealing to smaller brands with leaner teams, right? They're looking for a single 3PL that can act as a one-stop shop for all of their e-commerce related needs. So not having to manage multiple relationships and be relying on multiple different service providers is a very attractive attribute to a lot of these e-commerce brands.
You mentioned a great amount of things that are revenue streams that 3PLs potentially aren't looking as opportunities for from their customers. You're talking about returns, that digital image capture, looking at them and understanding that, hey, these are value-added services that we can then continue to charge for, capture, drive revenue around. That's very important for 3PL growth. And then also that strategic partnership. If you're able to reach out, and I might be stealing a little bit of our thunder for labor, but if you're able to reach out and understand exactly what that customer needs, you're able to better provide things that not only help them, but drive revenue for you. Continuing on, one of the things that I wanted to point out is sort of what's happening and where we're seeing. We mentioned those recent trends of in the last couple of years, we've seen, I think it was 87% of shippers said that there was a rise in outsourcing for businesses to go to 3PL. So that's on the rise as well. And I think a lot of that is due to the labor constraints and the labor sort of message that we've had over the last 5 years. And at this point, some of the larger companies are just saying, hey, let's just push that down onto 3PLs in some manner. And that's where I think some of that consolidation, as well as that sort of outsourcing growth, is also there. And some of the things that we see potentially mitigating that are the smart use of automation. And there's different levels of automation that we'll talk about. But you could start off at some things like maybe baggers and label printers and things like that, all the way up to like ASRS and things like that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And that actually takes me to our next topic, where we're going to start talking a little bit about how we could use technology in order to address some of the things that we brought out. And what I wanted to do was have another quick poll and understand, how do you guys feel about your company adapting technology? So we've heard from a lot of customers that there's different reasons why maybe they're using this legacy system and they haven't actually upgraded in order to provide some of these, again, visibility, value-added services capture, and other things. We'd like to understand from your standpoint, what do you feel like are the barriers to implementing it? Is it just the implementation and introductory and potentially fees for that new technology? Is it the fact that we feel like it's not a good fit for our current workforce? Is it the fact that we have a lot of legacy systems with maybe workarounds that are challenging to integrate to, and we're concerned that if we pull a peg out, then the whole thing will collapse, something like that? Is it just resistance to change? Our company feels like we're in the right direction. We're providing a service. We have maybe flat growth, but we don't have that burning bridge in order to expand out into something else. Or is it just that ROI? Maybe I'm seeing that if I were to change that, it would solve a couple of my problems, but maybe it wouldn't actually give me the return that I'm looking for from what we've modeled out and looked at. So looking through again, we're asking, what's the biggest barrier to implementing new supply chain technologies in your organization? As we start talking about how those different technologies can help you succeed in this challenging market with over 21,000 providers, which is really still pretty mind-blowing to me. All right, looks like we're getting some good things. We're into high costs is what we're really looking for. So we're actually seeing a lot of the high cost is what's driving it. Right. Let me share that report with everyone. This looks like high costs and integrations are challenging. All right, so moving on, let's get into the meat of the presentation and start talking about some of the strategic plays that we feel you could use your 3PL could use to extend their lead, grow their market, or maybe face some of this competition that we're seeing. So the first off, we've been talking about a little bit, and it's really understanding your customer's business. There's a few key things that we want to call out here, and that's really positioning yourself as a strategic partner. Maybe you're working with an e-commerce provider and you're seeing that they're having challenges with returns. That's where you come in and say, hey, listen, we could set up a QC station. We could set up a disposition area. We can allow you to have that reverse logistics flow by enabling these other processes. So now you don't have to worry about that. That allows you to drive a new revenue stream in that reverse logistics connection, as well as solve an issue your customer has, making you much more sticky and more valuable to that customer. And how do you do that? Really, you got to do your due diligence and get connected with those individuals. You know, maybe it's a summit, a joint type of investigation, offering your analysts up to make sure that they're looking through their data in the right way, looking through the data that you do have to see opportunities that they have for growth. Maybe there's some order consolidation they could do that would drive some impact, or rate shopping that they're not using. Pushing those through to your customers allows you to, again, become more sticky, become more valuable in that customer's perception, as well as, again, identify those value areas. Matt, Isaac, is there something that you guys want to add on to this from the, sort of on the ground type of view?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, Jason. I think, overall, by understanding your customers' operations, challenges, bottlenecks, and ultimately goals, you can really identify areas where you can provide value and help them improve resilience and risk management. I've been lucky enough to work with a number of 3PLs throughout my years, and have had, a lot of examples of 3PLs positioning themselves as partners to customers, really working together to improve existing inefficiencies and add value. But there is one particular example that really stands out to me. So, pretty recently, a customer of a 3PL was really struggling with high shipping costs. So the 3PL held products for this customer in both their East and their West Coast facilities. And there was current logic within the OMS for the 3PL to split orders depending on inventory availability in each warehouse. So the 3PL really dove in headfirst, and they worked to perform a case study along with the customer, really to evaluate the frequency at which one order could not be fulfilled from a single facility due to insufficient inventory on hand, and thus was forced to basically split the shipment or have one order be fulfilled from both facilities due to insufficient inventory. Through this case study, the 3PL and the customer found that this scenario was happening at a much higher frequency than what the customer originally thought, and ultimately that was what was leading to those higher than expected shipping costs. So ultimately, the customer ended up working with the 3PL to really properly stock both warehouses with products that commonly were ordered together to avoid these split shipment scenarios. So I thought this was a really interesting and good example of a 3PL being able to leverage the data that they had available to them to perform the analysis and really determine if a change in process was needed. The 3PL really partnered with the customer in this endeavor to ensure those challenges are being addressed, and they are really adding the necessary value the customer was asking for.
I love that, because you think about how many different wins that process ended up driving, right? You've got a win from the 3PL in that now you're becoming more sticky, you're being a better partner, you're also driving new revenue streams with potentially more inventory storage that you're doing. You're also creating a case study that you can now use as a selling tool in order to get out to talk to other companies about, listen, this is how we helped individuals. And now you can actually, that process of investigation, you can just actually reuse that process on other customers to see if there's other opportunities like that. And now you can establish yourself a competitive advantage of someone that consolidates, helps you position inventory, helps you manage your inventory better so that now you're reducing costs. That's a great story for any type of sales engagement and really caring about your customer. I love that. Matt, do you have any examples that maybe you can call out where you've seen things like what Isaac just called out?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. As I was mentioning earlier, I think vertical integrations, through increasing the amount of service offerings have really become a differentiator in the industry. Also being really, really good at just one thing is also something I noticed a lot of recently, rather than as a 3PL casting a wide net, just focusing on doing one thing or a few things really, really good. And one example of that I've seen across our customer base is we have a handful of 3PLs focused primarily on servicing brands who list on Amazon, right?
Mhm.
Whether it be FBA fulfilled by Amazon, FBM fulfilled by merchant, right? These 3PLs really consider themselves the subject matter experts on all thing Amazon. And Amazon's requirements, they can be rather complex when it comes to the carton labeling or the shipping compliance. So as a brand, right, being able to partner with a 3PL that you can trust as an expert on your business is crucial to success and really, helping you get a good night of sleep. So
Great example. At our customer advisory board, we had a number, in that 3PL conversation, we had a couple of different groups passionately talk about what they were specializing in. And I think this was driving some of their success. We had one that was saying, listen, we're the best hitting 3PL in the country. We stand by that. We've got efficiencies. We know how to do it. We're well. And that was driving their growth. And then we had another one where they were really saying, hey, listen, we understand that garment on hanger, the apparel, the challenges that, dealing with those hanger type of areas and having the equipment available. So listen, any kind of apparel, we're going to kill it, make sure that your customer gets exactly what they need in a nice time frame. They're able to do fast fashion and flash sales and things like that. And that is their reputation is driving more business and driving that growth for them. So again, I think that's a key message is making sure that you're specialized, figure out what you're good at, specialize that, and make sure that the industry knows, companies potentially know that this is what you're putting you're hanging your hat on. Moving on, another huge portion of this is we've talked about this throughout the session is making sure that you have the right technology stack. And really that makes sure that you have a WMS and an OMS to manage all the different sources and help you connect to those different sources quickly. Because one of the things that we see that sort of spells success or challenges for 3PLs is how quickly they can do two things. One, stand up new customers, and then two, allow new resources to get into their processes to make sure that they're driving through that product flow. So another thing that we've seen in our research is that in our customer base is modern 3PLs require the ability to handle it all. Omni-channel, high volumes for different peaks, direct to consumer, wholesale. You don't want to be limited. The story that we heard was, hey, we had a customer that was in footwear, and one of the things that they did was their initial system before they joined us, they were challenged because they were doing all their different runs in different sizes, and then they got into a wholesale opportunity, and now all their sizes weren't in runs; they were kind of split out, and that was challenging for them in order to pick the runs they needed for wholesale. So they were behind on this new opportunity, which could have grown their business where they didn't have the ability to do direct consumer and wholesale in the same facility. So you got to make sure that you're able to capture these opportunities when they come up. And also you've got to be able, we talked about earlier how individuals have true love and passion for their brands, and you got to be able to provide them some level of quote unquote control through visibility. And that visibility can't suck up all your time and everything. So you got to have a system that allows you to enable a 3PL portal, able to capture billing and be transparent about it. You've got to be able to do all that quickly without wasted cycles, or you're going to lose revenue opportunities. And finally, it allows you, a modern system allows you to pivot when necessary, when that wholesale opportunity comes in, when that brand changes direction and starts going to smaller, tinier things or larger, oversized things, you've got to be able to take advantage of that. Matt, what do you see when we're talking about all this? Maybe you could give me some comments as we go through all this and what you're seeing in the field.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on, Jason, is warehouse automation, right? The G2C future, it's now, it's here. And part of that future is definitely warehouse automation. And we're seeing a lot more automation being introduced within the warehouse, specifically on the outbound fulfillment side of the warehouse, right? To counteract a lot of the labor shortages that you mentioned that we're seeing, widespread across the industry. A lot of customers recently have either implemented or actively implementing MHE technologies such as goods to person systems with providers such as AutoStore, Bastion, right? AGVs, AMRs with Locus Robotics or Six River Systems, vertical lift modules, right? Auto baggers, pack station sortation machines, right? You name it. I think all of this is just an effort to maintain a level of throughput that's sufficient for the 3PL to help continue to grow their business and take on new customers, right? Because the question is, how can I 3x my daily order throughput without increasing labor costs? And automation is the answer to that question in a lot of cases. And we're seeing some pretty cool technologies being deployed across our customer base, and it's really fun to be a part of.
Excellent. I think that is a key advice as far as with the automation. And what a modern platform allows you to do is test out. You don't want to buy 100 of these robots and see that it doesn't work for you. But what a modern platform like the Posco allows you to do is integrate quickly with those, have predefined flows that you can start testing using the reporting system to understand the impact. So now you can have a good understanding of, if I were to roll this out and maybe go to a 24-hour operation in order to take advantage of them, let it do things at night where people aren't there. All that you can actually model it out and go in eyes wide open, understanding what that ROI is going to be for you. And again, that's what the place of you really can't do that without a modern platform that allows you those integrations, allows you to take advantage of that automation. The final thing that we'll talk about, and I mentioned, I think I forgot to mention this, that you will be receiving after this our playbook, a new 3PL playbook that expands on a lot of these ideas and includes more to help you, again, align your strategy to the market to make sure that you guys are growing in the manner that you can and succeed in this market. The last thing that we'll talk about from this standpoint is really preparing and upskilling staff. And, upskilling is kind of a new term to me, I guess, in the last 5 years and whatnot. And it's like, what does that really mean? And it's all about really training and preparing your workforce for this new future, these new modern technologies that we're using, potentially this automation. Individuals now have to understand how to use that technology, which generally warehouse workers are because they're growing up with it a lot more. But now we need to understand maybe how to waive things, how to deal with exceptions, potentially how to interact and help with these automation standards, and how do you manage a WCS. All those different things are items that we want to make sure that our individuals know. And when you're piloting these good to persons, like all the things that good to person MHE, like Matt mentioned, you've got to have training around there. And the training does a couple of different things. It not only upskills those individuals and lets them have more ownership of the process, it also gives you more loyalty. They feel like you're investing in them because you are, and that generally keeps your workforce a little more stable, maybe helps you avoid some of the bumps, the labor ups and downs that a lot of companies are experiencing these days. And really, we see digital literacy is really what sums up all this. If we think about all the things that I've mentioned, from a waiving strategy and MHE and et cetera, digital literacy is what this really is. And I think, Isaac, you've seen this on the ground a little bit. Maybe you could talk about your experience.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I've seen, great success in training programs that focus on, to your point, digital literacy, customer centricity, and new fulfillment processes. So this really includes educating your staff on, the intricacies of D2C order fulfillment, such as item picking, personalized packaging, and other value-added services. I want to briefly touch on new hire experience when it comes to, coming into the fold with a warehouse that's kind of fully automated. Oftentimes when you have newer folks that are coming aboard, they don't really have a lot of experience with MHE platforms or automation or any advanced picking or packing strategies. So a very effective strategy that I've seen organizations use in the past is to have a new hire onboarding team. So generally that team is made up of subject matter experts, usually department leads, who are really familiar with current operations and any unique workflows that are leveraged currently to serve their customer base. Usually this team trains all new hires that join the business, ensuring they're really up to speed and ultimately just set up for success in their role. Really this accomplishes two things. One, increases the likelihood that newer hires excel in their role, obviously because they receive the proper training. Number two, it really boosts employee morale. It gives more responsibility and ownership to the training team while leaving those that are actually being trained to feel prepped and really ready to hit the ground running. So, by providing this comprehensive training, you really ensure that your workforce can understand the unique requirements and really the challenges of D2C operations and can handle those efficiently. And one last thing to touch on that I think, Matt, you've talked about quite a bit here is just leveraging new automation, new technologies, and things of that nature. So, for example, if you implement a goods to person material handling equipment like autonomous robots or sortation conveyor belts, or even like a pick to light or a put wall system, in order to really gain the desired efficiency and accuracy that these systems can bring, staff really need to be trained to use this new technology in a mutually beneficial way. Through training programs, you can really familiarize yourself and your staff with these new technologies, really enabling them to onboard, operate, and ultimately optimize these systems effectively. It kind of seems like a no-duh moment, but naturally providing the necessary training on the unique aspects of intricacies of an automated warehouse really instills that sense of pride in your workforce. And oftentimes, really, you see a boost in productivity as a result of this training investment.
I've also seen the other side of that, where I've been in a warehouse where someone that wasn't properly trained on like a tilt tray sorter induced too many things and it got all jammed up. And then now all of a sudden you're down for an hour and you've got to make it up, So there's also sort of the other side of that where, a silly mistake can shut down a facility kind of quickly, because everything's flowing so quickly. Matt, maybe you could talk about some of the things that you've seen in the market around there, hopefully not about shutting down facilities.
I have seen a fair share of that, but no, I think to Isaac's point, he really summarized it all there, but just to try to tie a bow on it a little bit, I think one thing that I've noticed is the modern day warehouse employee, right? They need to have a much higher level of, technical acumen than the average warehouse employee, even a few years ago, right? In my experience, just interacting with 3PLs, implementing our software over the past 6-7 years, right, we've seen a much higher success rate when the 3PL super users have a high technical acumen. Meaning, I really believe there's a strong correlation between the technical acumen of the 3PL super users or employees and the performance efficiency of that warehouse operation. So really, in summary, by upskilling your staff, you ensure that you're well prepared to handle any of these unique challenges of the D2C future. And these super users, right, they become proficient in handling high volumes of individual orders and making sure that they're delivering a good customer experience, adapting to the fast-paced nature of the D2C market, right? This not only enhances your operational capabilities, but also positions your 3PL as a trusted partner for customers venturing into the D2C space.
Couple of things that stood out to me, that dynamic nature of warehouses now, that 2-day air, people don't think about it, but a lot of that is travel. Really with a 2-day type of delivery, you've got to get that thing picked, packed, and shipped within 4 hours of that order being dropped. That's completely different than where we started, where you were sort of building mixed pallets and you knew every week that, today I've got store 5, 8, and 9, and I just need to get that stage for that truck to reverse load and get it. Now everything's bam, 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 happening so quick that you do have to have that technical acumen, and multiple processes are potentially happening at the same time. I've got waves of singles, I've got waves of priority orders, I've got some wholesale orders on pick. All that's happening, and you got to have that understanding of the warehouse flow and where you're needed in order to keep that moving. So I think really, really great points there. So now we'd like to engage one more time with the last poll question. And this one is really around automation and understanding your strategic move for that. We see a lot of growth in that area, but we deal with companies that run the gamut from small to medium business all the way up to enterprise. So we'd like to understand with you that are joining, what exactly are you guys looking for, and how important is warehouse automation in your planning for the next 1 to 5 years? Is this something that you guys are really putting a lot of eggs in the basket on, or are you guys waiting to see what's happened, to see if your volumes are going to increase? I guess, just to really understand where you guys are in your journey of automation as to what you're trying to do with it. Are you trying to pilot it potentially? Are you just in the next year? Is it something that's really going to be on the roadmap, or is it something that, again, you guys are just playing a wait and see and let's see what's going on? So it seems like everything is trending towards it being either essential or very important in your strategic plans for the next 5. And we do feel that that's what we're seeing a lot. And maybe that automation, you don't have to go full bore in. Again, we suggest a manner of piloting a few. A lot of these firms are very happy to, basically get you a pilot set up with a very reasonable startup cost. Check it. Let's see, does it drive the actual benefit in throughput and efficiency and maybe labor avoidance that you're looking for? And then you could use the reporting across that in order to expand to see, hey, if we were to expand this out, what do we feel like a good understanding of what type of value it would drive? So that's really where we see you using modern platforms now, piloting, making sure that the juice is worth the squeeze, this phrase that we like around here, and then implementing to success. All right. So we got about half the people. And again, it looks like everything's trending towards essential or very important. I'm going to go ahead and share results. And again, you can see that essential and important are really where people are looking at. So there is a future in automation. And I think this says that you should be exploring that. If you're not, you should be taking advantage of your platform in order to extend out how you're using those MHE, and you can start simply by maybe doing some labeling, auto bagging, those types of things, dimensioning, all the way up to conveyance, AGVs, ASRS, and other things. All right. So now I'd like to move on to a little bit of a customer experience. We have a customer FSI that recently implemented and moved from a thing. And Matt, I think you worked with that, and I'd love for you to kind of give us an overview of what happened with the FSI.
Yeah, sure thing, Jason. Yeah, so today we're going to highlight Fulfillment Strategies International, FSI. They're a family-run third-party logistics provider near Atlanta, Georgia. They've operated for, I think, over 27 years now, managing fulfillment, returns, and focusing on customer kit assembly as well. So they saw a double-digit increase in shipping volume just 90 days after implementing a new fulfillment technology suite. So they also received raving reviews from their customers on the new level of visibility they had into intraday operations. They also saw a sizable reduction in overhead just due to their customers being able to answer a lot of their order and inventory related questions themselves via the client dashboards and reports. And then what you're seeing on the screen here, just some of the metrics that we benchmarked before the implementation, and then what we saw just 90 days after, right? 44% increase in total orders picked per month, 99.88% inventory accuracy, 10.6% increase in orders picked per month. So really some great improvements across the board in warehouse efficiency just through the implementation of new technologies. And also with the POSCO's pre-built socket integrations, FSI's development team, they were able to outsource a lot of their integration development to POSCO, which freed them up to work on other internal initiatives. So this success story really just showcases the impact of embracing the right technology that can have on your 3PL operations. So.
The other thing I'll call out is we're seeing a lot of our 3PLs use and partner with us to co-develop sales material using the functionality and features that we bring from our platform as a selling tool to entice more customers, to let them understand these are the types of benefits, these are the type of efficiencies that we drive with our solution. Here's the type of information that you have at your fingertips whenever you need it, allowing them to get in and look around and have that control and transparency that that owners are looking for from this customer. So I think all that is driving towards a real definitive answer that you should have, even if it's not DePosco, you should have a modern logistic technology in order to take advantage of this growth that we've seen in this operation by specializing, making sure that people understand what's special about you, and then doing cost efficient software selections to make sure that you're driving those efficiency, driving greater revenue capture from each of your customers. Quick session recap as we end this session, through things that we wanted to call out, and really that's making sure that you understand your customer's business, partner with them to look for opportunities to drive more value-added services and capture more revenue, have the right technology in order to avoid revenue leaks so that you're not providing services for them that maybe you're not getting compensated for. We want you to invest in those modern logistic technologies. Make sure that you have the right platform in order to profitably service these customers that you're gathering. There's lots of competition. The higher you could drive your revenue, the better off you're going to be. And I think that's pretty straightforward. And you also have to have the ability to manage just about every process, because you don't want to have to turn away a customer because you can't handle their wholesale, DTC, whatever that is, business. You want to be able to say resoundingly, yes, we can handle that, and know that you're going to be able to profit off of that. And that really requires that modern logistics technology. And then finally, investing in your staff, making sure that they are versed in modern fulfillment technologies and strategies, making sure that they understand that how to manage different exceptions, different material handling equipment. Invest in them, and they will invest back in you by staying longer, driving more tenure. And and I think everyone understands how important experienced resources are in a warehouse. There's always that one individual that knows everything and knows how to solve just about every problem. You want a whole workforce of those, and how you do that is by investing back into them. I want to thank everyone that stayed today to listen to our suggestions on strategy, and also remind you that you'll be getting an email that not only has a recording of this session, but also has our new playbook, 5 steps 3PLs can take to grow revenue and retain clients. It has some of the information that we've talked today, but really expands on much more and allows you to understand better some things that you can do to maybe set your 3PL on a track for success. I really appreciate Matt and Isaac joining, giving their real world experience and talking about some of the things that you've seen in the platform. Out in the field. Thank you guys for joining. And I thank you all for joining and listening to us. And we'll see you next time, and really appreciate all your attendance. Have a great day.